Cherry, I need you to promise me you'll stay here.
What? But...
Promise me!
Cherry Blossom waited outside after watching her big brother go into the house. She had been waiting for about 10 minutes and it was getting darker. The wind was picking up now and had an icy chill to it. Her hooves were wet from the grass caused by the night's air, but she didn't move. She waited like she said she would. Cherry jumped as she heard the noise of a branch breaking. She looked over to see where it came from. Just a little bit to her left, she saw a small white rabbit, and it was running towards the Everfree forest.
Mr. Rabbit, wait!
Cherry called after it, but it didn't stop. She struggled against herself as she saw the rabbit getting closer to the forest.
Wait! It's dangerous in there.
She took a step forward, and then before she knew it, she was running. She didn't want the rabbit to get hurt. As it reached the edge of the forest, Cherry called after it again.
Wait! Please don't go in there.
The rabbit stopped and turned towards Cherry Blossom. It then seemed to shake its head at her, then quickly turned around and hopped into the forest. Cherry stopped right at the edge where the rabbit had been just a second before. The pink filly stood there shaking. The ghost stories from the party remained in her head, but they all said it was just a joke. Yet the forest still looked monstrous. The trees looked like they had long arms and sharp claws of each branch reaching out towards her. The cold wind blew against her from behind, making it feel like she was being pushed in. The bush in front of her shook, and then she saw the rabbit going deeper into the forest. Cherry wanted to call out, but couldn't find her voice. She wanted to help the poor rabbit. If everything they said about the forest was true, then she just couldn't leave the poor animal. Cherry put her head down low and walked into the forest. The ground felt softer, wetter, colder. She focused on the spot the rabbit had jumped over and followed it. Cherry couldn't understand why the rabbit would want to go into the forest in the first place. It was horrible. The air tasted stale, the plants looked ugly and disgusting.
Animals would never eat this, would they?
Cherry kept heading deeper. The forest seemed still and lifeless. There wasn't a sound. There wasn't a breeze. It was empty, yet everything that was there looked like it was getting closer to her. Just then there was a rustle of a bush. Cherry Blossom hurried over to it.
There you are, Mr. Rabbit. We should get you out of here.
She leaned down to the bush, but couldn't see the rabbit.
Mr. Rabbit?
Suddenly a bird flew out of it, making her scream and jump backwards. Cherry fell over a branch that was sticking out, and she fell down a long slope. She rolled to the bottom, getting dirt stuck to her and twigs in her mane. As she came to a stop, she rubbed her head and slowly got up. Luckily she wasn't hurt. When she opened her eyes, her vision was blurred by the tears that had started to come. The little filly looked up and saw the hill that she had fallen down and couldn't see a path back up. She tried to climb up the slope, but the grass was too wet and she kept slipping back down. Cherry sat on the floor, wiping her eyes at the back of her hoof. She couldn't sit there now. She had to find a way back up. Cherry walked back towards the way she thought was home. But it was dark, and unknown to her, she was going deeper into the forest. It had only been about 5 minutes, but it felt like forever. Cherry had lost the rabbit, and now had gotten herself lost too. She kept walking, hoping to see something that she could recognise, or at the most reach the edge of the forest. Cherry had been crying silently, but knew that wasn't going to help her. She called out for her brother a few times, but stopped when she heard something in the forest move. It was up in the trees, and sounded too large to be that same bird. The noise of the forest echoed around her with every step. The darkness left her blind. She couldn't even see her own hooves at the end of her legs. Cherry bumped into something and was about to scream, till she realised it was only a tree.
I want my brother. I want to go home.
She kept her voice low to barely an audible whisper. She didn't want to be found by any creatures in the forest. She stayed there for a while, and then heard rustling noises coming from beside her. She looked to her side, and could barely see the bush next to her. The filly stood up and moved closer to the bush, keeping low. She didn't want another bird flying at her again.
Mr. Rabbit?
Cherry could hear the animal now. It was breathing heavily and deeply. Definitely wasn't a rabbit. Cherry's instincts told her to run, but she was frozen to the spot. Whatever was in that bush was large. She stared at it for a long time, unable to move. She felt her own heart racing in her chest. Something landed behind Cherry, and it was much bigger than her. She didn't dare turn around. She just screamed and ran. She ran as fast as she could, but she couldn't see in the darkness. She felt the branches and bushes scratch at her as she kept running. Something was behind her. It was making a low noise, but she didn't hear it over the sound of her own heart beating. Just then a hoof caught on something as she tripped, falling to the floor. She looked up and saw a gap in the trees with the moon shining through it. The creature that had been chasing the filly landed right next to her. She felt the creature grab her, bringing her closer into a tight embrace. Cherry panicked and started to kick her hooves, fighting off the creature.
Please calm down. I promise I won't hurt you.
Cherry stopped fighting and then looked at the creature as the moon illuminated it. It was a yellow Pegasus with a long pink mane, smiling down at the little filly.
It's okay. You're safe now.
Cherry then saw the white rabbit that she had followed into the forest, sitting on top of the mare's head. The Pegasus was looking down at her with a kind and gentle smile. Lance ran around the outside of the house panicking. Cherry had disappeared and he had absolutely no idea why.
Cherry! Cherry Blossom!
Lance called out her name repeatedly, but there was never any response. Pinkie Pie ran over to him after coming back from Sugar Cube Corner.
She never ran back to the party, so I have no idea where she went. She's really good at hide and seek.
Lance stared daggers at Pinkie Pie. This wasn't a game. His sister was missing. He feared that it could have been their father, or just a complete stranger who took her. The ivory-coloured pony then turned his ferocity onto himself.
I never should have left her. I was so stupid. What kind of irresponsible brother am I?
Lance looked around and then thought about the forest.
Cherry isn't stupid. She would never go in there. Not after everything that was said before.
His panic was getting worse. Then he heard Pinkie shouting.
Ah! Up in the sky!
Lance turned his head up to above the every forest and saw a dark silhouette of a Pegasus with its wings stretched out and flying with the full moon behind it.
It's back there!
Pinkie screamed and ran off. Lance looked towards the Pegasus as it got closer. He could see there was a yellow mare with a pink mane. On the Pegasus's back, Lance could see that she was carrying a small pink filly.
Cherry!
The light blue maned stallion rushed over to where the Pegasus landed. Lance felt a wave of relief rush over him. Cherry got down and then embraced her brother.
Big brother, I was so scared.
Cherry, I'm so sorry I left you alone.
After a moment, Lance then slowly pulled out of the hug to look at Cherry Blossom in the eyes.
What happened to you? How'd you end up in the forest?
Cherry looked away from him at first. She knew that it was for a silly reason.
I'm sorry.
The pink filly was trying to fight back the tears. She didn't want her brother to be mad at her.
Excuse me?
The voice was so quiet and timid they almost didn't hear her. Lance looked over to the yellow Pegasus.
I'm sorry. It's, my fault she was in there.
Cherry turned her attention to the Pegasus too.
You see, Angel here came in to get me when I had spent too long in the forest. I was with my friend Zakora and didn't see how late it was. And Angel was worried about me coming home in the dark, so he came to get me. And, well, Cherry saw Angel going into the forest. And she's such a little dear for worrying about the little bunny, and she wanted to help him. But Angel got too far away, and she got lost. So I'm very sorry. Please don't be mad at me.
The mare looked down at the floor, hiding behind her mane.
No, it's alright. I just...
Lance couldn't find the words. He wanted some pony to be mad at. Himself for leaving Cherry? Cherry for disobeying him? This gentle yellow Pegasus?
Are you okay? If you're mad, I'll just go.
She turned to leave, but Lance called out to her.
No, wait!
He then stood up and walked over to her.
I want to thank you. Thank you for helping Cherry get out of the forest.
Oh, that's okay.
She backed away timidly. Lance was struggling to find the words.
Can I do anything to repay you, Miss?
I'm Fluttershy.
Fluttershy had now become incredibly quiet. Was Lance making her uncomfortable?
I'm Lance Angelswift, and you've already met my sister Cherry Blossom.
Oh, yes. We had a nice talk on the flight back.
Fluttershy was smiling now and talking a bit louder. Cherry called over to Lance, standing beside Fluttershy.
Fluttershy has a lot of animals, and she said I could go see them any time.
Cherry had a smile on her face that made her look an awful lot like Fluttershy. Any pony would have guessed they were related.
Well, if Fluttershy is okay with you visiting her, I don't see a problem.
Lance smiled back at the both of them. Cherry turned around to Fluttershy.
Can I come over tomorrow? Please, Miss Fluttershy?
Cherry asked with a pleading look on her face. Fluttershy just looked down at her with the same smile.
Oh, of course. That would be wonderful.
Excuse me, Fluttershy, where exactly do you live?
I live in a little cottage just down there.
Fluttershy pointed a hoof off to the left of their house. They couldn't see anything due to it being night time, but Lance figured he could find it in the morning.
Well, we should be getting inside now. It's very late. Thank you again, Fluttershy.
He wanted to invite her in for a drink as a proper thank you, but the house was still completely empty and he'd nothing to offer her.
Oh, that's okay. Goodbye, Mr. Angelswift. See you tomorrow, Cherry Blossom.
Cherry waved a hoof at the Pegasus mare.
Bye, Fluttershy. Bye, Angel.
She called out as they walked off. The little white rabbit waved a paw at Cherry Blossom before turning away. Lance nudged his sister and directed her towards the house.
Cherry, you know you broke a promise to me, right?
Cherry's smile fell immediately. She was about to apologize when her brother cut her off.
I know you wanted to help that rabbit, but if anything were to happen to you, if Fluttershy hadn't found you...
Lance didn't finish his sentence. He didn't need to. Cherry understood. They both walked inside and Lance took his sister directly to the bedroom. It was very late, and after everything that happened on this long day, she needed some sleep. Cherry suddenly noticed how clean everything was. Lance explained that somehow Pinkie had cleaned up the entire house and she did it all as an apology for making her cry. Lance then made Cherry climb into the bed.
Now, you lie down and go to sleep. I'll see you in the morning, okay?
He turned around and blew out the candles. He then drew the curtains shut and began walking towards the door.
Wait!
Cherry called out loudly to her brother. Lance turned to look at her in the dark.
Can you stay with me tonight?
He smiled before he shook his head.
There's not enough room for...
Please? I don't want to be alone.
Lance's heart hurt. He walked over to her bed and took hold of one of her hooves.
Cherry, you'll never be alone again. I promise.
He then nuzzled the side of her neck.
Let me put out all the other candles first. Then I'll be right back.
Lance left for each of the other rooms, blowing out the candles and locking the front door. As he went into the kitchen, he saw a pink box on the side counter. Walking up to it, he saw a card sitting on the top.
Welcome to Ponyville, Lance and Cherry. Your newest and bestest friend, Pinkie Pie.
Lance opened the box up, and inside was a large cake with yellow and pink frosting. The word welcome was written across it in blue icing.
Well, I guess I know what's for breakfast.
Lance thought to himself with a laugh. He closed the box and then blew out the last of the candles. He headed back towards Cherry's room and saw that she was sitting up, waiting for him.
I thought you might have fallen asleep.
Lance said quietly. Cherry shook her head.
I couldn't sleep. The dark.
She sounded like she was holding back tears. Lance understood that she must have been lost in those woods for a long time and couldn't imagine how scary it must have been in there for her. He then climbed gently onto the bed and Cherry immediately hugged him tight before he'd even gotten comfortable. He said nothing about it though.
Cherry, I want you to make a promise to me. And this time you have to keep it, no matter what. Okay?
Lance could feel Cherry nodding against him.
I want you to promise that no matter what, you won't go back into that forest alone again. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
Promise me, Cherry.
I promise.
Cherry said it quietly, but it was enough. Lance took a deep breath. Cherry then gently lifted her head up to say one more thing before resting her head down again.
Do you remember that song you used to sing to me?
The one to help you sleep?
Mm-hmm.
Aren't you a bit old for that now?
Please?
Okay.
Lance smiled down at his little sister and closed his eyes. He remembered the song very well. Their mother used to sing it to him when he was a tiny colt. Every time Lance had a bad dream and would cry, the mother would come into his room where the outside lights were too bright to be blocked by the curtains, and she'd sit beside him open up a tiny little music box and sing to him. It was one of his fondest memories, always reminding him of their mother. After Cherry Blossom was born, Lance would always sing the song to help his little sister get to sleep. The music box was lost to them now, but even today he could still hear the tune as he began to sing.
Don't you worry, I'll be here in the morning. I will keep you safe with me. The sun has gone down, but don't you fear, my darling. It's still there beneath the trees. The moon has been risen by Luna's command, and the stars shine brightly across all the land. So just you sleep now, I'll be here in the morning. I will keep you safe with me.
Good night, little sis. I love you.